Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. The rain hammered against the hotel window like 1,000 tiny fists, each drop carrying the weight of unspoken words between them. Marcus stood at the glass, watching the storm tear through the city below, while behind him, Elena sat on the edge of the bed they would have to share. Neither of them had planned this moment, and yet here they were, trapped by circumstances that felt almost too convenient to be coincidence. The front desk said it's the last room in the city. Elena's voice broke the silence, barely audible over the thunder. Every hotel is booked because of the convention. Marcus turned slowly, his heart doing that familiar dance it always did when he looked at her. 3 years of working together. 3 years of carefully maintained professional distance. And now, this. The soft lamplight caught the uncertainty in her dark eyes, and he felt something shift inside his chest like a lock finally finding its key. "We're adults," he said, though his voice carried less conviction than he'd intended. "We can handle one night." But as the words left his mouth, Marcus knew they were both lying to themselves. Because the truth was, they had been dancing around something inevitable for months now. The lingering glances during meetings, the way her fingers would brush his when passing documents, the electric tension that filled every room they entered together. Tonight, that careful distance would be measured in inches instead of feet. Elena stood and walked to her suitcase, her movements graceful despite the nervous energy that seemed to radiate from her skin. "I'll take the left side," she said, not meeting his eyes. "I don't move much in my sleep." Another lie. Marcus had seen her at the company retreat last year, had watched her through the cabin window as she tossed and turned on the narrow cot, her dreams clearly as restless as her waking thoughts. But he didn't call her on it. Instead, he nodded and began unbuttoning his shirt, trying to ignore the way her breathing seemed to catch in the reflection of the window. The storm outside matched the one brewing in the small space between them. Each flash of lightning illuminated truths they weren't ready to speak, each rumble of thunder echoing the tremor in Elena's hands as she pulled her hair into a loose bun. Marcus had memorized the curve of her neck months ago, had imagined what it would feel like to press his lips there during countless sleepless nights. Now, watching her prepare for bed just feet away, the fantasy felt dangerously close to reality. "Marcus?" Her voice was softer now, vulnerable in a way that made his chest tighten. "Are you sure this is okay? I could try to find somewhere else, ... He turned fully then, seeing the worry painted across her features. Elena Chen was the strongest person he knew, had climbed the corporate ladder with determination and grace, never letting anyone see her sweat. But right now, she looked young and uncertain, and something protective stirred in his chest. "Elena, we're colleagues. We're friends." The words felt inadequate, couldn't capture the complexity of what she meant to him. "I trust you." She nodded, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Friends," she repeated, as if testing the word on her tongue. "Right." They settled into an awkward routine of taking turns in the bathroom, each giving the other privacy to change. Marcus pulled on his usual sleep clothes, a t-shirt and cotton pants. Elena emerged in an oversized sweater that fell to her mid-thighs. The sight of her bare legs, usually hidden beneath professional skirts and tailored pants, sent heat racing through his veins. The bed seemed to shrink as they both approached it. Queen-sized, which had seemed reasonable when they checked in, now felt impossibly intimate. Elena pulled back the covers on her side while Marcus did the same on his, their movements synchronized like a dance they practiced but never performed. "Good night," Elena whispered as she slipped beneath the sheets. Good night, Marcus replied, though sleep felt like the furthest thing from his mind. The darkness that followed was thick with awareness. Marcus lay rigid on his side, hyper-aware of every breath Elena took, every small movement she made. The space between them felt charged, like the air before a lightning strike. He could smell her shampoo, something floral and warm that made him want to turn and bury his face in her hair. Hours passed, or maybe minutes' time seemed elastic in the charged atmosphere of their shared space. Marcus was beginning to think. Elena had fallen asleep when she spoke, her voice barely a whisper in the darkness. I lied earlier. His heart stuttered. About what? I do move in my sleep. I'm actually a terrible bed partner. She paused, and he could hear the smile in her voice. I steal covers and take up too much space. Marcus found himself smiling too, some of the tension easing from his shoulders. I snore sometimes. I know. I've heard you during those longboard meetings. They both laughed softly, the sound intimate in the darkness. The ice-broken conversation began to flow more naturally. They talked about work, about dreams, about the paths that had brought them to this moment. Elena told him about growing up as the daughter of immigrants, about the pressure to succeed that had driven her to work twice as hard as everyone else. Marcus shared stories about his grandmother, who had raised him after his parents died, about the fear of not being good enough that still haunted him. I never knew that about you, Elena said after he'd finished telling her about his first day at the company, how he'd spent an hour in the bathroom trying to calm his nerves before the interview. There's a lot you don't know about me, Marcus replied, and the words carried more weight than he'd intended. The silence that followed was different from before, charged with possibility instead of discomfort. Marcus could feel Elena's warmth beside him, could hear the soft sound of her breathing. Without thinking, he turned toward her, finding her already facing him in the darkness. Elena, he began, but she placed a finger against his lips. Don't, she whispered. If you say it, everything changes. But everything had already changed. Marcus could feel it in the way her breath hitched when he whispered her name, in the way she didn't pull away when his hand found hers beneath the covers. Her skin was soft and warm, her pulse racing beneath his thumb as he traced circles on her palm. We shouldn't, Elena breathed, even as she moved closer, her body betraying her words. No, Marcus agreed, we shouldn't. But when her lips found his in the darkness, all rational thought fled. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative as if they were both afraid of what they might unleash. But when Elena's hand tangled in his hair, when she made that small sound of surrender in the back of her throat, Marcus was lost. They kissed like drowning people reaching for air, 3 years of denied attraction pouring out in a single moment. Marcus's hands mapped the curve of her waist, the softness of her sweater, while Elena's fingers traced the line of his jaw, his neck, the muscles of his shoulders. Every touch was a revelation, every kiss a confession they weren't ready to make. With words, when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus pressed his forehead against hers. Elena ... I know, she whispered, her voice shaky. I know. They held each other then, not speaking, just breathing the same air, and trying to process what had just happened. Eleanor's head found its way to Marcus's shoulder, and he stroked her hair, marveling at how perfectly she seemed to fit against him. This complicates things, she said eventually. Everything worth having is complicated, Marcus replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Elena tilted her face up to look at him, and even in the darkness he could see the conflict in her eyes. What happens tomorrow? I don't know, he admitted, but I don't want to pretend this didn't happen. She was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus felt his heart sink. He'd pushed too hard, moved too fast. But then Elena kissed him again, soft and sweet and full of promise. "Neither do I," she whispered against his lips. They talked until dawn, sharing dreams and fears and the kind of intimate thoughts that only come in the darkness between sleeping and waking. Marcus learned that Elena wrote poetry in her spare time, that she'd wanted to be a teacher before choosing business. Elena discovered that Marcus had never been in love before. Not really. Not in the way that made your chest ache and your hands shake. "What about Jessica?" Elena asked, referring to the woman Marcus had dated for 2 years before their breakup 6 months ago. "I thought I loved her," Marcus said honestly. "But it was comfortable, expected. This ... He gestured to the space between them, to the way Elena's body curved naturally against his. "This is different." "Different how?" Marcus took a breath, knowing he was about to cross a line he couldn't uncross. "Different because I've never felt like I might die if I can't touch someone. Different because I've never lain awake at night thinking about the way someone says my name. Different because I've never been terrified and exhilarated at the same time." Elena's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment Marcus thought he'd said too much. But then she kissed him again, and he tasted salt and hope and something that might have been love. "I'm scared," she admitted when they broke apart. "Me too," Marcus said, pulling her closer. "But I'm more scared of not trying." They fell asleep as the sun began to rise, wrapped in each other's arms and the fragile promise of something new. Marcus had never slept so well, had never felt so complete. Elena's breathing was steady against his chest, her hand resting over his heart as if she could feel it beating just for her. When Marcus woke, the afternoon sun was streaming through the windows, and Elena was gone. At first, he thought she might be in the bathroom, but the silence was too complete. Her suitcase was missing from the corner where she'd left it. Her clothes were gone from the chair where she'd folded them. Even her scent seemed to be fading from the sheets. On the knitstand, where her phone had been charging, was a note written in her careful handwriting. "Marcus, last night was beautiful, but it was a mistake. We work together and I can't risk my career for something that might not last. Please understand that this is for the best. I'm sorry." Elena. Marcus read the note 3 times before the words sank in. Then he crushed it in his fist, his heart breaking with an audible crack. Everything they'd shared, every whispered confession and gentle touch, reduced to a few lines of careful, professional distance. He showered and dressed mechanically, going through the motions of checking out while his mind reeled. By the time he reached the office on Monday morning, Elena had already submitted a transfer request to the Seattle branch. She was gone by the end of the week. Marcus tried to tell himself it was better this way. They'd been colleagues first, and maybe she was right about the complications. But late at night, when the world was quiet and dark, he could still feel the ghost of her touch, could still hear the way she'd whispered his name like a prayer. He threw himself into work, taking on extra projects and longer hours. But Seattle wasn't that far away, and sometimes he found himself looking at flights, wondering if he could find her, if he could make her understand that what they'd shared was worth the risk. 3 months later, Marcus was working late when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. His heart stopped when he saw the message. "I lied. It wasn't a mistake. I'm sorry." Before he could respond, another message appeared. "I got scared. I've never felt anything like what I felt with you, and I didn't know how to handle it. I thought running would make it easier, but it only made everything worse." Marcus's hands were shaking as he typed back, "Where are you?" "Seattle, but I'm thinking about coming home. My transfer was supposed to be permanent, but I put in for another transfer. Back to you." If you'll have me. Marcus stared at the message, his heart pounding so hard he could barely breathe. Everything they'd shared in that hotel room came flooding back, the taste of her lips, the way she'd fit perfectly against him, the promises they'd made in the darkness. I never stopped wanting you, he typed. Come home. The response came immediately. I'm... On the next flight, Marcus left work without explanation, driving straight to the airport. He paced the arrivals area like a caged animal, checking his phone obsessively. When Elena finally appeared, emerging from the crowd with a single suitcase and uncertainty written across her face, Marcus felt like he could breathe again for the first time in months. She stopped a few feet away, as if unsure of her welcome. Hi, she said softly. Hi, Marcus replied, drinking in the sight of her. She looked thinner, tired, as if the distance had worn on her as much as it had him. I quit my job, Elena said in a rush. I know it's crazy, but I couldn't work for the same company anymore, not when every email reminder from corporate made me think about you. I'll find something else, but I needed to tell you. Marcus crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, cutting off her words with a kiss that tasted like coming home. Elena melted against him, her suitcase forgotten as she wrapped her arms around his neck. I love you, Marcus whispered against her lips, the words he'd been carrying for months finally finding their voice. I love you too, Elena replied, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry I was such a coward. We're both cowards, Marcus sighed, pulling back to look at her. But maybe we can be brave together. Elena smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her since that night in the hotel room. I'd like that. As they walked out of the airport together, Marcus thought about the storm that had brought them together, about the lies they told themselves and each other. Elena had been right about one thing: sharing a bed had changed everything. But her greatest lie hadn't been about moving in her sleep or wanting to keep things. Her greatest lie had been pretending that love was something to run from instead of something to run toward. 6 months later, Marcus woke to find Elena stealing the covers, just as she'd warned him she would. Her hair was spread across his pillow, and she was mumbling something about quarterly reports in her sleep. He smiled and pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. Good morning, cover thief, he whispered. Elena stirred, turning in his arms with a sleepy smile. Good morning, snorer. I don't snore, Marcus protested. The same argument they'd had every morning for the past month since she'd officially moved in. You do, Elena said, kissing the end of his nose. But I love you anyway. Marcus looked at the woman in his arms, at the morning light painting gold streaks in her hair, at the way her eyes still held traces of dreams. They'd shared countless. Bed since that first night, had whispered countless confessions and promises in the darkness. But none of them had felt as significant as this moment, this ordinary Tuesday morning when she called him a snorer and loved him anyway. I love you too, he said, and meant it with every fibre of his being. Outside their window, the world was waking up, but inside their cocoon of blankets and morning warmth, time felt suspended. Elena traced lazy patterns on Marcus's chest while he played with her hair, both of them reluctant to let the day intrude on their perfect moment. We should get up, Elena said without making any move to leave his arms. Should we? Marcus asked, tightening his hold on her. You have that meeting with the Peterson account. They can wait. I have a job interview at 10. Marcus stilled. The marketing firm? Elena nodded, suddenly looking nervous. I know it's not as prestigious as my old job, but it's a start. And it's here, with you. Elena, Marcus said seriously, taking her face in his hands. I'm proud of you. for taking the risk, for choosing us. But I want you to know that I would have followed you anywhere. I know, she said softly, but I was tired of running. I wanted to come home. And where's home? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Eleanor's smile was radiant as she kissed him, pouring all her love and certainty into the connection between them. Right here, she whispered against his lips. Home is wherever you are. As they finally got up to face the day, Marcus thought about the night that had started it all. They'd shared a bed, and Elena had lied about moving in her sleep, about not wanting complications, about it being a mistake. But in the end, all those lies had led them to this truth. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with a storm and a single room with one bed. Sometimes, the best lies are the ones that force us to face the truth we've been hiding from ourselves. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the person you're lying to is lying right back, both of you too scared to admit that what you're feeling might be love. Elena had been wrong about one thing, though. She wasn't a terrible bed partner. She was perfect cover-stealing, space-taking, sleep-talking perfection. And Marcus planned to spend the rest of his life proving it to her, one shared morning at a time. The storm that had brought them together had long since passed, but the shelter they'd found in each other's arms remained. And in the quiet moments between sleeping and waking, when the world was soft and full of possibility, Marcus knew that some lies were worth telling if they eventually led you home. Some lies, he thought as he watched Elena get ready for her interview, were just love wearing a disguise, and he was grateful for every single one of them.